And that night, I wrote a whole letter to my team and said, I'm sorry, I can no longer do this anymore, and I'm shutting down the agency.
That was Brittany Antoinette. She's the captain of the ship at Not So CEO. Not So CEO is a professional playground for founders and creatives. So think tools and resources for folks who are building their dreams and their businesses. Now, before Not So CEO popped off, she was an agency owner, just like me. She helped her clients get press and retail placements in places like Sephora, West Elm, Forbes, Vogue, and many other really, really cool things. She is a brand architect and she is damn good at her job. So she levels out the playing field for professionals and gives them the blueprint. So you can expect things like accessible programming and the tools in the form of events, community workshops, and blueprints on topics like competition analysis and finding your target audience. I met Brittany when she was on a panel, and I was so in awe because there were just so many overlaps in our stories. And I just knew I had to speak to this girl, y'all. If you haven't heard my journey with Burnout, check out the episode with Dr. Margaret Said. It's on the heavier side, but if you're going through this, it's really helpful. It is so, so good. Now, if you want to hear Brittany's full journey, check out episode 1 of 2 of her podcast, titled, of course, Not So CEO. Brittany has done some pretty cool things in her career, but she did not get there unscathed. Now, she's completely managed to heal her relationship with work, but it was quite a journey. Not So CEO was birthed out of an existential burnout crisis. Here's our conversation. Hey there, fellow commuters and go-getters, and welcome aboard the Express Train to Success. Coming at you from the heart of hustle culture, I'm your conductor of candid conversations and snappy insights, Macy, and this is none other than the Office on Avenue M podcast.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
We're about to dive headfirst into the maze of entrepreneurship and career journeys while being human, which happens to feel like a really hard thing to do at the same time for some reason. We'll be cruising through the stations of personal growth, career strategies, mental health, PR prowess, and creative direction, all while unraveling the enigma that is office politics and why you hate your job that just so happens to be your own freaking business sometimes. If you don't know me, I'm Macy. I've got over a decade of experience in the media business trenches, and now I'm the owner of my own creative communications agency, and we've helped tons of brands reach national media prominence. I'm talking Forbes, Essence, Good Morning America, Bloomberg, the whole gamut, but I'll get more into my resume later. I've got stories to share, lessons to impart, and a refreshingly unfiltered take on all of the things. We'll dissect it all, from the sweet symphony of success to the less melodious moments of being misunderstood in the workplace. Consider this show as your stop for solidarity. I hope you feel seen.
The next stop is
a burnt out CEO's story.
Brittany, you have done a lot with this agency, and you got to a point where you wanted to close your doors. What catapulted that decision? How did you arrive there? We're like, I'm shutting down, or I'm pausing.
Oh, yes. Currently, the idea girl is an independent practice, meaning that I work alone. But previously, I ran an agency and I had a team of, I had a project manager, I had client relations manager, account manager, I had assistants, I had copywriters. I was a full-fledged agency. And I got to a point where it began to be too much. I didn't have a life. I remember going on a trip to Bali with my sister, my aunt, and her friend. And I remember getting up at 2 a.m. Bali time to be on calls at 2 p.m. stateside time. And I was never enjoying life. I was always working, and I felt that my identity was enmeshed in with being an agency owner that I didn't even realize, or I forgot who I was and what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
There were many turning points for me feeling like I wasn't valuable unless I had this position. When we're talking ego, right? It made me feel important. It made me feel that I was valuable. It made me feel like I had meaning. But I feel like that was what toxic girl boss hustle culture ingrained in us, right? Covered up in millennial pink, right? And It was like work, 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 work. And I will never forget, there was one Christmas. I believe that it was Christmas, the end of 2020, going into 2021. And I remember being up in my room crying, like, I mean, bawling tears because of how overworked I felt. Projects were running behind schedule. I barely had budgets for the project because the project that should have been completed 3 months ago was still on my calendar, dealing with chasing clients for invoices. And I remember just being so tired. I remember one of the designers on my team, she is actually one of my best friends. Her name is Adina. She's amazing. And for Christmas, I remember she sent me a gift. And when I opened the gift, first, it was a card that I opened up and it said, Brittany, what you've done with the Idea Girl is amazing. And I'm so grateful to be a part of this journey. You don't know how you changed my life and how many other people's lives you've changed.
Wow.
And I've seen you do so much for other people. But unfortunately, Brittany, I haven't yet seen you do anything for yourself.
Oh,
This gift is for you to manifest your own ideas into fruition since you're so busy doing it for everyone else. That was what kind of got the wheel churning in my head, that it's time for me to do something for myself. Fast forward into 2021. 2021 was a better year financially. My team, everything felt better. And then somehow the same thing happened all over again, where I found myself being depressed, overworked, miserable, and most of all, burnt out.
yeah.
Okay. So I didn't actually even recover from my last bout with burnout. It was just kind of like I just put a band-aid over it instead of actually finding the root cause of the issue. So I fell right back into the spell of overworking myself, burning myself out, trying to make ends meet, paying everybody but myself. And it finally got to a point where I was just so tired. I was tired of hiring project manager and still having a project manage. I was tired of having Slack fall on me. I was tired of managing instead of creating. It got to a point where I realized I was not having fun in this business anymore. Not only that, financially, it wasn't making sense. I completely fucked up my personal account. I drained my savings account for this company.
Right.
And I started hating it. I started resenting it. I will never forget, I literally had my account in the negative. And it was almost 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was living with my then boyfriend at the time. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't. And that night, I wrote a whole letter to my team and said, I'm sorry, I can no longer do this anymore. And I'm shutting down the agency. And when I hit send, I probably let out a like one of those ugly cries, like, because I couldn't,
Oh,
I
wow.
couldn't. It hurt me so much to do that because it's like, Brittany, you're taking money out of people's mouths and you're letting people down. And it's like, girl, you're killing yourself. Why does everyone else matter but you?
Right.
Why are you always getting the short end of the stick? Why don't you matter? And that day that I thought was the worst day of my life happened to be the best day of my life. I was finally free. And it's
Wow.
like I hurt. And so I felt like, at first, it felt like I did the worst thing in the world, right? I felt like I had the world looking at me and that I could no longer, like, you can't quit, Brittany. You're the Black owned agency that helped all these brands do this and that and blah, 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 blah. Ego. I realized that I tried to do something for myself. And that was the first time in a very long time that I put myself first and I did something for myself. And I remember crying about it to my therapist and telling her, like, oh my God, like, I can't believe I had to do this and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm the worst CEO. I'm like a not so CEO. And we paused both for a second. I was like, I'm a not so CEO. And she's like, oh my God, And that is literally how Not So CEO was born. It was born during a therapy session when I was beating myself up, crying about me being the worst person in the world. And I was like, wait, I'm an Not So CEO. That's actually not a bad thing.
In
and
therapy.
and it was born in therapy. I wanted to find a way to use being self-made with self-care and the importance of balancing self-care with being self-made. Because I feel like that's something we don't talk about. We just talk about being self-made. We just talk about making all this money. We talk about let's scale to 6 figures, let's scale to 7 figures. Let's do this. And I remember I was pouring everything into my company. I was paying $2,000 a month for this leadership program to help my agency scale to $1 million. Like I was doing the most, and I was doing the most for everybody else but myself. And there was so much freedom that came with shutting down my agency. There was so much freedom that came with it. I felt like I let everyone else down, but the only person I was letting down was myself all these years,
Right.
you know? So that's pretty much the story. I
Yeah.
have started working smarter, not harder. And then what I started doing was I raised my prices, and what would take me and my team 3 months to do, I was now able to complete in a month.
Pause. Did you hear that? Brittany raised her prices to optimize her efficiency. Now, while her story is a little different than most, this is a perfect learning moment of the importance of raising your prices. First of all, did you know that women are more likely to undercut themselves when it comes to pricing, especially when they're starting out? There are a few reasons for that: confidence, imposter syndrome, trying to build your portfolio. I get it, but yet and still, the importance and value of raising your prices is still worth noting. Let me tell you why. It's simple math, babe. If you are doing 10 projects for $10, you're going to get the same amount as if you were doing one project for $100. And on top of that, you're going to get the opportunity to pour yourself into that one project and bring your full self to it, because you're not spreading yourself thin, trying to be for everybody, trying to accommodate everybody. We are not robots. You also want to make sure you're honoring yourself, your time, and not contributing to burnout by spreading yourself thin, overpromising, and underdelivering. And you really ain't no good to anybody if you burns out anyway, and that's just the truth. Something else you talked about just now was feeling as though your identity was wrapped up in your role. And I think as a society, especially in America, we do that a lot. If you ask someone who they are, the first thing they say is, I'm a mom. They say, I'm a doctor. They say, I'm an agency owner. At one point, I told myself, I was on dating profiles and I was like, why am I leading with all my accomplishments? My career is not my personality. It really isn't. I felt so validated by my accomplishments, and it is a part of me, don't get me wrong, but it's not everything. So when you really take a step back and really take inventory of your intrinsic value, you take things a lot less personal. You really do.
And
Yeah.
I can agree to that 150%. I feel that a lot of the time we want to matter to someone, which is why we find a lot of comfort and solace in our roles and our titles, because it sums up who we are as human beings and how much we mean to the world, how much we're providing to society. And we all want to feel important to somebody. And a lot of the times we, again, enmesh ourselves in these roles because it gives us some authority and superiority and makes us feel like we matter and that we mean more than the average person on the street. But again, all
matter.
ego. It's all ego.
You want to feel like you matter. I mean, it's ego, but it also, a lot of times, Brittany, I think it's about your upbringing too. Have you felt invisible as a child? So you have to have something that you can sink your teeth in to be like, I did that. Well, I accomplished this. And do you see me now? It really is for your ego, like you said, but it also is for your inner child that needs to feel like you matter,
Macy, I swear, you summed it up so eloquently. That is exactly where it came from. I felt invisible as a child. And then I got older and I'm like, whoa, I'm important now. And my whole
Call
life
the shots,
revolved
baby.
around my title. But I also feel like just during the time period when I feel like everyone was becoming an entrepreneur, I feel like this idea of being a girl boss was something that everybody aspired to, the point where I've worked with women who could care less about the problem that they were solving because they wanted to just be a girl boss. They wanted to be noted as a Forbes 30 under 30 figure. They wanted the accolades. They wanted the Time magazine feature. and it became an aspiration.
Yeah,
Or
it really
just
did.
become a fountain.
It was a moment. It is a moment. It's still prevalent, but I think self-care is another talking point that we're seeing in like the mainstream narrative, thank goodness. But there definitely was a moment where it was hustle culture or die.
And I guess it
And
really
I
was.
felt I succumbed to it. I think my reasons are a little bit different than what you just mentioned. I became an entrepreneur by an accident. I could talk about that all day, but it really was, I just kept getting contracts. And I'm like, okay, I have more clients than I anticipated having. I need to hire help. And it was like a snowball effect after being laid off because it's something that happened to me. An agency that I had worked with at the time, they were new and they lost a really big account. And I was the first one to go because I was a junior executive. But at that time, I had been freelancing for years. And I'm like, you know what? Let me just go all the way with this, even though I don't know that I fully knew what I was doing. It worked out, I guess. 10 years later, I'm still in business. I'm still getting referrals, but it really was an accident for me. It wasn't like, oh, I just want to be a girl boss and show up on the gram. I just felt like that other stuff, that external visibility, showing up on Instagram and YouTube was what I had to do now that I'm already in it. So I just felt like I was in golden handcuffs without actually having the bank like that. I was in this life and there was no backing out. I have an entrepreneur mindset, and at some points I resented it, and now I feel a little bit happier about it, a little more proud of it. But my relationship with it is very funny. I could talk about it all day.
It's funny because Macy, when you were talking about your journey and how you became an entrepreneur on accident, I didn't become an entrepreneur on accident. God told me, or my ancestors, somebody told me to shower one day. They were like, you need to recreate the Black Wall Street. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? Like, it's Black Wall Street. What the fuck is this? And coincidentally, I had an Africana study class that semester in college. And I did not know how wealthy, I'm talking African kingdoms, the Mali kingdom, the Ghanaian kingdom, the Songhai kingdom.
Talk
I
about
I did not know about these things. And then I realized, and this was around when Black Lives Matter first started, I realized that my problem extended outside of me, that me growing up in America and being a Black woman in America, a lot of people related to that. And with my background in business management, in finance, in fashion merchandising and design and all these different things, I'm like, yo, what can I do? What can I do to help not be bogged down by these societal atrocities that have held us back for so long? School makes it so that you're multitaskers. And I feel that not all of us are multitaskers by nature. I feel like it is not natural for us to be multitaskers, which is why a lot of us have very short attention spans and we can't focus on more than one thing. We can't focus on one thing at a time because of the way we were brought up. You know,
it.
we're
Yep,
forced do this, do this, do
absolutely.
that at the same time. Like, what about being present? I feel that doing one thing at the one time allows you to be in a constant state of presence. And a lot of us are not present. A lot of us are living in the past. A lot of us are living in the future, all because we don't know how to be with ourselves, focused on one thing at a time and actually putting our all into it and doing the best that we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm happy you see that. I mean, it's just a testament to how you got where you're at, to have this school of thought around work, around school, and around system. It sounds like you have an entrepreneur mind. So it's evident to me. Entrepreneurship was you stepping into who you were meant to be rather than discovering something new. Right? You went from years of being kind of like confined to this one student, follower situation, associate, to individual contributor, to now I'm meant to lead and I'm meant to create and I'm gonna do both at the same time. So
Absolutely.
that must have been liberating. It's so interesting hearing you stumble into entrepreneurship and creative entrepreneurship at that, to reaching a place where this is what you always were meant to do. I'm so happy I found it. I'm so happy I'm in this position, to now having this level of resentment and really negative relationship with work when you reach that breakdown point, right? So how did you know you were burnt out?
Oh, how did I know when I was burnt out? You know, it's so funny because when I realized it was burnout, now that I think about it, it was actually a client who told me I was burnt out. I remember
Hmm,
getting on a call.
that's not good.
Oh man. I owe this woman so much. She has no clue how much I appreciate her. I remember having to get on a call and I was behind on the deadline and whatnot. And on a call to tell her that I was behind. And I told her, I said, hey, I actually can't get on camera today. I look horrible. And she said, Brittany, turn on your camera. So I turned on my camera and I broke down and cried. And
Oh,
I
wow.
cried. And I remember her telling me that she went through burnout just 2 to 3 years prior. She went on vacation and it was almost like she was on the beach and she was with her partner and she passed out. Like she passed out from being so overworked and she did not work for the rest of that year. And she told me, she said, Brittany, you are in the middle of the ocean and you are paddling to get to the shore when all you need to do is float. I will never, ever forget that. I will. And she politely took herself off of my roster so I could rest.
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
Said, don't worry about my project. She said, you matter more. And that also helped me gain the confidence to also prioritize myself. The fact that she experienced the same thing, it's just beyond me. Yeah.
It is powerful, and you don't forget those moments. I actually had a client, I told them in a weekly meeting that I was depressed, and this was before I took that time off. I'm so fortunate and so grateful for my team because they were able to keep things afloat when I was just unraveling. But I told them, and interestingly enough, my client broke down and cried right with me because she was burnt out. And I'm like, why are we just allowing ourselves to spiral? We need to have these conversations. We need to be prioritizing rest. Why is rest radical? And it opened up a whole new dialogue and changed the way I worked from that day when she saw the human in me and I saw the human in her, and I wasn't just a transaction and a vendor or a consultant. I was a person who needed to connect with myself, who needed to just, again, turn off my brain because there was nothing left to give. So shout out to clients like that who can just look beyond the project and say, this is a human being. And I'm gonna give her space to heal, to rest, and to regroup and rebuild. I'll never forget that.
I knew that I was burnt out when I resented waking up the next day. Like when I started no longer looking forward to what tomorrow was going to bring because I almost knew what tomorrow was going to be like. That was when I started resenting it. And I didn't realize that I was burnt out until I had stomach issues. So crazy because I rarely got sick. And I realized that was around the time I was burnt out. That was exactly when I was burnt out. It was my body was trying to tell me to slow down. And I refused to listen. I refused to listen. And it got to a point where my stomach wasn't operating the way that it once operated. And if anyone knows, stomach issues are not to be played with. That is your core. I realized that my body was trying to talk to me. I read a lot. I love to read. And I realized that your stomach is directly connected to your brain. And I started learning about stress and how majority of us, for one, are stressed out and we don't even realize it. A lot of us have normalized stress as a part of our every single day. I'm reading Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he actually breaks down stress and how a lot of us as human beings have accepted this as our new normal. And stress is actually the underlying cause for majority of diseases, cancer, for autoimmune diseases. Because what happens if you are constantly in fight or flight mode, your body, all the blood is going to, all the adrenaline is going to your kidneys, your adrenal glands. That's where all of the attention and focus is going to. So the other parts of your body are getting cut off from that life force. But what happens is that animals, they have the same response, but they go back to a state of homeostasis after a few hours. We don't, because
Yeah.
we're constantly reliving that. And if you experience a stressful situation that's caused trauma in the past that you haven't let go of, anything that's a little trigger, you're going to be living in that state again. So it was to the point where an email sound would like,
Oh,
oh man, like
girl. Oh my God. I know that all too
I would
well.
I would hear, yeah,
Notifications off, Brittany. Like
pa-
I'm done.
I
I'm
don't
done. Stop the
patience.
show.
I don't patience. I don't even do the notifications to see how many emails I have. And I got to a point where I was just spread so thin when I would just break down crying out of nowhere. That's when I was burnt out. And
That's
I've
it
had,
took all of that. Meanwhile, your body tried to tell you before. Interestingly enough, I don't know why I'm talking about her, but she had a point. Julia Fox, she has this clip circulating right now where she was just like, my notifications are off. I decide when I look at my phone, not the other way around. And I was like, yeah. I've
yeah,
been subscribed to that. It's just like people are like, why are your notifications not on? Because I really don't want to feel like a slave to my phone. And I think when we're in this hustle culture, like entrepreneurship, go get it, go get it, go get it, go get it, that ding is like a command to you, and you stop whatever you're doing, and what you're doing is just breaking apart your homeostasis, breaking apart your flow, whatever you're doing. So I decided I will look at my phone, maybe every other hour. I'm not always good at it, but when I do implement that, it makes such a difference. It makes such a difference. Yeah, but it's interesting to hear you talk about how you knew, because when you know, you know. Okay, so let's get into burnout. How do you navigate it? What are the tips we need to take into consideration to bounce back? Because I myself have definitely been there. But first, I want to let my friend Salem, who's a coach for burnout, who helps people heal from it and live fulfilling lives after it, define it for us. Let's listen.
So I tend to define burnout as a series of symptoms that point to intense psychological exhaustion. What I've learned is that the symptoms of burnout look different for everyone, and especially for those of us who are high achieving and high functioning. Those symptoms that would be so clearly burnout for other people are things that we tend to easily dismiss and actually, for some of us, use as fuel to keep doing the work. In spite of the different ways that burnout might show up for us, that psychological exhaustion might show up for us, these are the commonalities I tend to find. A deep sense of dissatisfaction when doing things that once brought you fulfillment, usually without any material change in the condition of those things. A second commonality of burnout that I see is an overwhelm with basic tasks that just doesn't go away but gets worse over time. And a third commonality of burnout I usually see with my clients is a deep dread and feeling of despair when you think about the future.
So now I want to give the audience a little bit of some nuggets, because you got this whole community, whole ecosystem going with Not So CEO. And I know that you've amassed some tips for us. So I want you to think about this. Can you share some practical tips or strategies that others can implement to shift their mindsets, create a healthier approach to work, or to avoid burnout altogether? What are your top, let's say 3? That's a cute number.
okay, top 3 things. Number one, I would say is to develop a morning routine for yourself.
Okay.
That's number one. I have a morning routine where I wake up every morning, I pray, I meditate, I stretch or move my body. So whether I stretch in the bed or go to the gym, I read, I drink an herbal tea. And the reason why I do this is because I call this the fuel tank. Like one of the products I have is called the Notion Goal Getter Template. It's a goal getter planner. And inside of the planner is a checklist of the different days of the week. And you actually have to check off your fuel tank. And your fuel tanks are the things that make you feel full, because what happens is that we wake up, we get dressed, we head to work, and we don't pour into ourselves at all whatsoever. So the thing, like when I notice I'm having a bad day, I'm like, did I fill up my fuel tank? Like, how am I
Mhm.
out here? How am I out here doing everything for everyone else, and I have not done one thing for myself? Number two, I would definitely say to the kids are now saying, standing on business. Your mental health is not to be played with, okay? And when you let people play with you, you are playing with yourself. I find
Mhm.
that a lot of us adopt a people pleasing personality in business. Some of us do, not all of us. And to that, I say is that sometimes we're so worried about maintaining and managing a relationship with other people that we completely abandon the relationship that we have with ourselves.
Yeah.
And we want to be respected. We want to be revered by everyone else around us. But when we're putting ourselves in situations as to where we're disrespecting ourselves,
Oh,
how
absolutely.
we start stripping away from our being. And third, do not be afraid to pivot. Do not be afraid to pivot if something is no longer working out for you. Do not be afraid to shift direction. If you notice that the direction that you're going into, it's not as desirable. It's not what you thought you wanted.
How do you get back from that though, Brittany? How, like, once you've actually been burnt out, you're depleted, how do you bounce back? What are some key steps someone should take to really get back on the cogwheel and get back to business if they so want to anyway? Before we get into Brittany's anecdotal answer, I wanted to hear from our burnout coach, Salem, once again. Here's what she had to say.
The first thing is to do an objective audit of your life and take a step back from non-essential responsibilities. And before you ask, well, if I'm able to do that, what do I do with all this time that I'm getting back? Use that to reinvest into yourself. Go back to the basics of self-care. So one of the things that I share with my clients is self-care isn't always just the grand gestures that we do, once a month when we do a full spa day. The self-care that actually makes the biggest difference when you're in the moment of recovering from burnout are the little things: getting good sleep every night, eating nutrient-dense meals, drinking lots of water, moving your body in whatever ways are accessible to you. Doing those things as often, as regularly as you can, makes such a difference in your recovery from burnout.
Salem is cooking right now. She's really cooking right now. But I'm going to go back to Brittany and then back to Salem. And between these two women, you are going to feel equipped to navigate your burnout situation and come up on top. Let's keep listening.
When it comes to nurturing yourself back from burnout, I would definitely say, for one, allow yourself to mourn. That's number one. Give yourself space to breathe. Give yourself space to cry. Give yourself space to feel your emotions. That's number one, because it's so easy for us to just say, we need to get bounced back and get back to work. Like, no, bitch, you need to cry for like a good 10 days because you've been bottling this stuff for like about 10 years. You need to cry. That's number one. Who also helped me through my burnout was my therapist. My therapist helped me with my burnout because what I realized is that I was overworking because I felt like I had something to prove. So what you really need to do is you need to dive deep and figure out, how did you burn yourself out in the first place? Who told you you weren't enough as a kid? Who told you that you needed to show up bright and early while everybody else was sleeping? Who told you that? Who was hard on you when you were a kid, when you were younger? Who expected more from you than you even wanted for yourself? I think that's also very important. I would also say figuring out, for one, demolishing your old schedule and creating a new one and creating structure in your life. I feel that burnout is also due to not having a certain sense of structure, because with structure, you know where things belong. Things have boundaries. Things have cutoff times. But if you're working till 12 o'clock in the morning, but it says that your agency closes at 4 o'clock, why the fuck you still working till 12 o'clock in the morning? Right? So having
Inquiring minds want to know.
Right.
Why are you still up?
Right. Why are you still up? It also looks like, for one, also getting sleep. Getting sleep. I swear this year I have gotten the most sleep of my life.
So did you hear that? Structure. Structure, structure, structure. For some reason, creatives feel stifled by structure, but the reality is structure creates freedom. I need you to internalize that message. Structure creates freedom. Don't be afraid of it. It is not the enemy. And also sleep. It's so important. Salem even mentions sleep in the next section of our conversation. She gives some actionable steps and strategies that both myself and Brittany followed. So let's hear from her one last time.
The second thing that I always recommend to my clients is to get really, really good at setting, communicating, and enforcing healthy boundaries. The boundaries are the parameters that we put to protect ourselves. They're the boundaries that we put, the parameters that we set with other people to help us be in relationship with them while also being in healthy relationship with ourselves. And the third strategy that I always offer my clients is to stop managing time and start managing energy. This framework really helps my clients move through moments of burnout because our time is infinite, but our energy ebbs and flows. And so once we get in a practice of understanding how to track our energy, how to manage our energy levels through the day, how to do things that energize us while balancing that with things that maybe intensify the experience of life we're currently having, how to neutralize those experiences. It gives us a lot more information about how we spend our time in ways that are actually replenishing to us. So if you don't find yourself experiencing burnout, but you're in the middle of doing some really challenging things that you know might set you up to be burnt out, what are some things that you can do to avoid burnout? I wanted to share 3 strategies as well that I offer my clients on how to avoid burnout in the future. The first way to avoid burnout is to stop before exhaustion on every task you're working on. Somehow we've been conditioned to believe that we have to work ourselves to the bone, that we don't stop until things are either completed or we are exhausted, and we have to kind of retrain our minds to learn to stop certain tasks that we're working on before we deplete our reserves, to stop when it still feels good, because that gives us something to look forward to when we re-engage with the task. The second strategy to avoid burnout is to under promise but pace your delivery. So a lot of us get really, really good at doing the things that we do, and we want people to think of us as reliable. And sometimes that can come back to bite us because we share our best work. And so in those moments when we're not feeling our best at all times, we don't always know how to hold back some of that for ourselves. So under promise and also pace your delivery of the work that you do. And a third strategy to avoiding burnout is to continue revising the expectations that people have of you. Continue setting realistic expectations, continue revising the expectations when they do not serve you. So a lot of these shifts around recovering from burnout, but also avoiding burnout, require a whole new approach to the way we organize our lives. And that is why my work as a mindset coach is to help my clients identify limiting beliefs that they have about their lives and their work, so they can create new beliefs that support them rather than deplete them.
Managing energy is major and was such a breakthrough moment for me. It was so helpful. I spoke to Salam during my burnout crisis, and she was tremendously helpful in just the consultation phase. So if you want to get in touch with her, please visit burnoutsupportgroup.com to sign up for her newsletter or potentially set up a consultation. Now, in this part of the conversation, I spoke to Brittany a little bit about what I did to get through my crisis. Let's listen.
And I will also say with burnout, find a support system. See if you can have a group of friends that can hold space for you. One of the things that saved me was having a sister circle. I have a group of friends of mine, and was from all different walks of life. And we meet once a week, every Saturday at 2 p.m. And my girlfriend Simone said that she said the most successful women had a team of women around them. They have a support system of women around them.
Oh,
I think it's really important for us to have that support system, to be around people that can hold space for us when we feel that we're not worthy, right? We feel that we're not worthy of rest. We feel like we're not worthy of a pause. We're not worthy of taking a breath or taking a step back, because this society has convinced us that you're worthless if you don't work, and you're not contributing to a society if you're resting. Therefore, and it's funny because I worked with a client too, and one of the brands we built is called Chanzo, and we basically talked about radical rest and how resting is a form of resistance. Shit, our ancestors were working day and night on plantations. Okay,
because they had to.
somebody,
We got
I
choices now.
dare someone to call me lazy. I dare someone to call me lazy. Okay. I come from a line of people who had no choice but to work. And now I have the option to not only the option, but the leisure. I have the gift now to work, but at the same time not kill myself in the process. So why I continue working that way?
Yeah.
And having that support group, having that friend group, I feel like it's crucial to your success. And to help nurture you back to help from burnout, because sometimes it takes other people around you to say, girl, you was working like a dog, or girl,
Yeah,
you
I had
doing
that
too
moment.
much
I did.
rest. I recommend everyone get themselves a circle of friends. And some of us are full-time entrepreneurs. Some of us are full-time workers, but everyone does have their own entrepreneurial thing going on. And we all help each other. We all work with each other. We do things like we meditate together. We pray together, visualize our futures together. Like we did a meditation with each other because we were all in New York at the same time most recently. And we sat there, we did a visualization meditation where we each put our energy towards each other's biggest
Oh, I
goal
love
and
that. I love
idea.
that.
So I feel like that's also very important. You know, I feel like burnout is something that a lot of us don't talk about. A lot of us don't realize that we're actually functioning burnout. I feel like burnout starts off as high functioning anxiety before it actually turns into full on burnout. But with
Yeah,
burnout,
yeah.
you don't want to wait until it's too late. Like your body will tell you. Your body telling you is like, oh, bitch, you've been burnt out for a while. You've been burnt out for a while. Like your personality changes. You're more snappy. You're not as joyous as you used to be. There's so many signs. There's so many signs. Like I was burnt out for a long time before I even realized I was dating somebody. And he was like, yo, you have a nasty fucking attitude. I don't know what is up with you, but I was burnt out. I was tired. I was
Yeah.
tired.
Yeah. That's crazy. For me, what I did, a lot of things you mentioned, yes, ditto. But I actually took 2 months off completely. And when I say no one understood that, I mean, I was given a lot of slack about that. But I needed to take those 2 months off in order to recharge my batteries fully. Because what I found was that when I was kind of slacking off and missing deadlines and like letting things slip between the cracks. And you know what? I'm just gonna take a nap, or I'm just gonna go to the gym, or do whatever it is to distract myself, whatever deadline I had on top of me. I would still be thinking about work and feeling guilty about it. But if you're thinking about work when your time off, you're still working. You're still working your brain. So when I eased myself back into my regular schedule, I said, Macy, you're gonna work 2 days a week. Actually, that's what I'm doing right now too. It's a preventative measure. Toward the end of the year, I'll do 2 days a week of work. A lot of folks really don't get that, and I don't need them to. That's fine. I know what works for me. It's 2 days a week, and on those other 3 days, I'm doing other things, but I'm not thinking about I'm not thinking about work on those days. I'm not, because it occupies a lot of your mind, your space, your energy, and it feels like you didn't truly take a day off.
Yes.
So I dedicate that time to myself, my interests, my relationships, the people who are important to me, other hobbies and things like that. And maybe a personal project like this. Today is technically my day off, but this is a passion project, right? Something I'm doing for me. And then Thursday's a work day. And then Friday I will take off fully off until the new year. Then I start again. But that was the biggest turning point for me when I realized I was working even when I wasn't working mentally. I was never turning my mind off, and it was exhausting. Again, that was Brittany Antoinette, and she is amazing. If you want to keep in touch with her, you can subscribe to her newsletter, go to her Instagram, Not So CEO, and subscribe to the paper newsletter. And it is, of course, about getting this paper. Duh. You also can check out her website at notsoceo.co. To whoever's listening right now, I want you to know that I'm wishing you productivity coupled with peace and purpose. Thanks for riding with us, passengers. If you found this episode entertaining, helpful, or just didn't hate it, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts so we can get those numbers up. It makes it all worth it. There's more where this came from, so you can find more episodes of The Office on Avenue M wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to keep in touch with me, I'm at Meet Macy on Instagram. You can also reach me on my website via the contact form at MacyMediaNYC.com. Don't ask me why I said www. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me there sometimes. This podcast was produced by the Macy Media team and others. I'm your host, Macy Harrell. This episode is sponsored by Macy Media, a media agency dedicated to amplifying meaningful stories to the right audiences. Macy Media specializes in public relations, creative direction, media training, brand development, partnerships, photo, and video production. Thanks for tuning in to The Office on Avenue M. And this is my stop.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.